58 years, and he has a company called Sunworks Corporation. So if you see this video and are terribly frightened about building your own greenhouse, there is a way to get a greenhouse built with without doing it yourself, which is obviously to hire somebody. So you will see that as well. So anyway, with that, I think I'm gonna now just explain that I just as a basic grounding, a high tunnel, if you're wondering, is a little confusing because we do call them greenhouses, but what they actually are steel structures, and then they're covered with a plastic that goes over the top of that steel structure. So it's very sturdy. If all of you experienced the storm last night, you'll know that we just put this high tunnel up, and there was absolutely no impact from all that wind on our ground. So we feel very happy about that. So anyway, with that, I'm going to go to the next. So Tony, can you play this video from your side? Or do I need to do it from Zoom?
You're on mute, Tony.
I'm on mute. So yeah, I believe you're gonna have to share it from your PowerPoint. And if you can, make it full screen.
Yeah, I think I can.
Yeah.
Oh. Well, here's the link.
Yeah, it's gonna play now. Turn the volume.
No, I can't do that. Is it playing on that side?
Not playing. Not playing. Oh, Zoom.
All right. It just flipped over to YouTube. Well, I think maybe we'll have to skip this video because it's probably causing some problems. Okay, so I think over to Jill. So Jill, do you want to share your screen?
I can.
Very good.
Do you see it or not yet?
Not yet.
Host disabled participant screen sharing, so I don't have the ability.
Okay.
You will soon.
Josefina, can you oh, here we go. I can do it. All right. Jill.
Now I see it. Yep.
Oh, very good.
Hopefully you should have it coming at you.
Great.
Do you see it now?
Yep.
Great. Okay, so my name's Jill Ott. I work for USDA Natural Resource Conservation Service, and I'm the district conservationist out of the Frenchtown field office, servicing Hunterdon, Somerset, and Union counties. So they asked me to speak on one of our many practices that we help cost share through our financial assistance programs. And just to talk a little bit about what you need to know if you're interested in pursuing that cost share. So there must be a cropping history on the farm for the crop that you intend to grow in the high tunnel. This is not for a new adventure, so you have to have experience with that crop. You must have a return on your property in order for the financial assistance to be available to you. Most typically, that's not a problem with high tunnels because usually it's your plant health and vigor or extending your growing season. As far as eligibility, we must have a location on croplands to install the high tunnels, and it must be a manufactured kit and installed in its entirety according to manufacturer directions. So a lot of times folks who are in a contract for this practice will send us what they intend to purchase for us to look over and just to make sure that it meets all of our requirements. It must have 6 milliliter plastic and must be a minimum of 6 foot in height in the center. Some of the other things to think about is it must be on native soil. Since we are resource concern focused, we want to make sure that you're not bringing in amended or heavily amended soil. We can do raised beds if you're interested in raised beds, but again, they must be filled with native soil or minor amendments added to them. The raised beds are 12-inch height and barriers are prohibited. So the plastic liner from native soil to beds cannot do if you are involved in our programs. So to get into the financial assistance end of things, we are designed to help farmers with the cost of installation, but we do not cover the full cost typically. This is a competitive program, so it is a process. You apply, we go through a ranking process, and we would help you through all of those steps, just so you know it is competitive. And practices are used to treat an existing resource concern. So once you have a contract and you're installing, it must be installed in its entirety to manufacturer specifications. I stress that because if the kit calls for ends to the high tunnel, you must install the ends to the high tunnel before we can pay, or any other components that are add-ons. And it must be inspected by NRCS that it does meet all of our requirements before we can issue any payments. We do have two different funding sources, although most of the funding comes out of our EQUIP program. We do have the AMA program available this year with a focus on our high tunnels. Both are cost share, both are at the same rates. The biggest difference is AMA is geared more towards someone who's new to us, who might be a startup operation. You have to have that crop grown on your property, but this might be your first high tunnel. And then the ranking points and questions are adjusted accordingly. So the questions are more geared towards new adventures or someone that's a little more new to the high tunnel. So the dates and the specifics that I talk about are New Jersey specific, and everything changes year by year. So right now, we just got done with our first round of applications for the FY21, which would be the next fiscal year. So if you were to apply today, you would be applying for FY 2022, or sometimes, depending on how much funding our state gets, we might open it up to a round 2 of applications. But moral of the story is we call it a continuous sign-up program. So you can come into our office and sign up at any time, and we'll talk you through timing. But the biggest thing is we do not work quickly. You know, obviously we're talking a year to 2 years out. So you really need to plan ahead when you're working with us in our programs. But all of our assistance is free, whether it's for the financial end of things or we do general conservation planning. We can come out, walk your farm, look at your resource concerns, help you develop objectives, and then we'll plug the programs and the financial end of it into that conservation plan once we have that plan figured out. So you can sign up for the program funding end of things, or you can just give us a call for the initial site visit. A planner will come out to the farm. We'll just walk the farm with you and help you view things through our eyes. Our funding programs are competitive. Ranking period for most programs are this time of year. It's fall into early winter, and that holds pretty consistent year to year. The date might vary a bit. Ranking is based on how the objectives meet national, state, and local concerns, and also cost efficiency. So for a high tunnel, we get a pretty good bang, environmental bang for our buck. So they usually rank pretty well. There is no minimum farm size or minimum farm income. So we work with pretty much everybody. However, there is a cap to our high tunnel funding. So this is one of those rules that changes year to year to year to year. Right now, or last year for the program rules, we capped it at $11,761 for regular rate. Or if you fit into our historically underserved category, it was $14,113. This year, I think they're going to a maximum square footage as to what we could pay. But again, it depends. We'll discuss that when we get out there and talk about the application. But the difference between the regular rate and the HU rate would be for a beginning farmer. So someone who has not filed a Schedule F in one of the last 10 years, or it could be socially disadvantaged. So we have different ethnic categories that if you can self-certify that you fall into one of those categories, you can get an increase in financial assistance. Or there is a, it would be based on minimal income. So and every county has a different level. So I can't quote you those income levels now, but if you have a lower income, then you would also qualify for the HU rate. All of our programs are 100% voluntary and non-regulatory. So anytime, if you don't like what we have to say, you have the right to say, nope, sorry, not interested. Once you sign a contract, you are committing to installing that practice, but there is no commitment. You have to be 100% willing to enter anything that we're offering you. And as always, we are USDA, so we're a federal agency. Everything remains private as far as your information. So the big question, what are the rates? So for regular rate, it's $2.76 per square foot, and these are FY21 rates. For historically underserved rate, it's $3.31 per square foot. And again, it's not intended to cover the complete cost of the project. And if you do any of the install or labor yourself, that can also obviously count towards the cost. So things to remember if you're considering our program, you must have control of the land. You don't need to be landowner, but you do need to have consent from the landowner that they're aware of what you're doing and that you're going to be installing these practices. You do need to have farm records set up with FSA, and we can help you through that process always. It's not a quick process. If you applied today, you would most likely be looking at install of summer of 2022. We cannot pay for practices that have already started prior to signing our contract. So it's not like you can put it in today, then apply, then get funding and get paid after the fact. And the only requirement we have for our EQUIP eligibility, or one of the big requirements, I should say, is there is an average gross income cap. So if you or the entity are making over $900,000 AGI, you do not meet eligibility for EQUIP. And then this is just a little map of NRCS and where our offices are located. And I am right here in Hunterdon County. And the different counties, you can take a look to see what office you should contact for your county, or feel free to contact me and I would be happy to put you in contact with the right person. And also I put Shirley's name there. She is our program assistant in our office and she knows the application process inside and out. So if you're interested in applying or have any questions, if you're applying through another office, please feel free to reach out and we'd be happy to answer any questions.
Great.
That's all I have. If there's any questions, I'd be happy to answer.
I think Amanda probably check in and see if people have questions at this point on NRCS, since that's the first segment of this workshop.
Yeah, sure thing. So if anybody has questions, please put them in the chat of the YouTube, the YouTube video that we're watching. And I will direct them to our speakers as we go. So far, I don't have any questions though.
And also know that there's a delay. So, you know, if folks are watching now, you can actually slide your slider to the future. If you started late, there's a few tricks, but then you might miss some questions. But we'll just stall for a minute. I hope everyone's having a great time.
Okay, well, I think we should probably keep going then. Oh, there's one question.
Please check.
Oh no. Okay.
That was me.
Oh, that was Amanda. Okay. All right, Oscar.
Getting excited.
He's delaying because he's next. So now I'm going to introduce Oscar Schofield, who happens to be my husband and my business partner at the farm. So he and I co-own our small farm in Kingston, New Jersey, which is Riverstone Farm. So with that, I'm going to share screen and let Oscar take you through what our process was. To connect the dots between what Jill said and what we're going to say, even though you wouldn't be constructing a high tunnel with NRCS until the summer of 22, there's plenty of things you need to do beforehand anyway, because you do need to get all the approvals. So let me at this point turn it over to Oscar, so you'll get a sense of some of the things that are required.
All right, so we heard about the program. Actually, Nagisa heard about the program and started talking to NRCS, and we got some very good advice, not only in putting the packet together. So when you're putting that packet together, use them as a resource. They were incredibly helpful. That was our experience. The first thing you're going to need to do is, really think about what site you want to select for the high tunnel. It obviously is going to have to take into consideration sort of sustainability, like what would be potential erosion, irrigation, and runoff issues if you have that on your land. We're pretty flat, and so it was pretty easy. You're going to need to think about a viable water source. You don't have gutters on a high tunnel, so you can't put out water barrels and stuff like that. So, that should go into your planning. We went with a professional group both in purchase and construction. So we let the experts choose our covering material, which was fantastic. The real thing that's going to come up when you do local permitting too is make sure you have pretty good clearance on all sides. We're a small farm in a semi-rural area, so we have neighbors, and so that's something that the township is actually going to consider and check on. So you want to make sure you've essentially got that considered, and then you'll need to take care of it at the end of its useful life. Research your local regulations. We happen to live in a historic district, and it was probably our largest hurdle. You're going to need to actually be quite aggressive talking to your local regulators. We thought we had everything in hand. We had talked to them over the summer, and then at the very last minute, literally the day of we were going to proceed with construction, they added another hurdle of the historic district approval. Throughout that whole time, you've got SADC helping you along the way, and you work with NRCS to develop a plan. We had to do 2 approvals essentially. The key thing to really emphasize when you're doing the approvals is you're building a temporary structure. It is not something with a concrete base underground. Okay, so that becomes a real big issue, especially if you're in a semi-urban area. The Historic Commission is going to require a pretty extensive packet, a map. There'll be some nuances to that depending on where you live. For us, we had to show that we were a certain distance from a canal. So if you go
this
up
is the
here,
map.
so here's a map of our property. And if you look along the back there, there's 3 fields. Our house is in the other thing. And if you go down way to the left, there's a canal. And if you're within a certain distance of it, you fall under much more aggressive historical oversight.
So we should mention that the yellow strips here are what we've also committed to.
Yep.
And Jill's team is very good at advising on this. So we signed up to do the high tunnel. That's that pink strip here. But we also agreed to do perennial pollinators. And the pollinators in combination with the high tunnel gave us a higher ranking. So remember, she did say it was competitive. So that was something that was very helpful. And her folks came out to our fields and noticed that we really were not using this backfield at all. And they said, well, then you might consider perennial pollinators, which will help your pollinator population and will help your ranking. So that's why we agreed to put that in. And of course, we're looking forward to beautiful flowers all season long. So.
And I actually have to say, when we were going through sort of the approval process in our township, the pollinator field actually was a huge plus. because it showed that we were, reinvesting and trying to keep things sustainable. But the other thing I'd mention about NRCS is their expertise and sort of support and advice continues after you get the grant. And so we look forward to getting their advice as we start building these pollinator fields next spring.
Yeah. So I think with that, we've pretty much covered all the regulation. I do want to mention that this document on understanding local regulations, the fact sheet on temporary greenhouses in New Jersey, is posted on our site. And it is actually very helpful when you're talking to your township people, because sometimes they don't know the full regulations and they might give you guidance that isn't exactly correct. So the reality is you do not need a construction permit for a temporary greenhouse in New Jersey. And that's important to know.
That was something we had to show them, though.
Yeah, because they didn't know that. Yeah. But you do need the zoning agreement so that you can proceed. So the combination of the historic commission, if you have that applying, and what do we have, a zoning?
It was essentially a zoning approval. And the main thing they looked at there was the position of our high tunnel on our land, that it was set back from neighbors and other units. That was the key thing that they looked at.
So I think we have there it is.
Yeah.
So we actually literally had to show them that it was this far from the canal. And so it really didn't apply to this.
We didn't need to hire an engineer to do this. This was Google Earth.
Yeah.
So, I think as long as you have the due diligence, so it's in the packet when you go before the local township, they tend to be pretty supportive because they're also trying to maintain agriculture within their townships. And so if you can frame that debate that way, you'll find that you have a pretty supportive atmosphere. That was my experience.
Yeah. Okay, so I think that's pretty much it on that. If there are any questions on the approval process, go ahead and put them in the chat now. But otherwise, I think we're going to move on to construction, which is Matt and the video. So Matt, do you want to introduce yourself? Because Matt is actually an old NOFA friend.
Hey guys, my name is Matt Hand. I ran an organic farm in New Jersey for a bit. I apprenticed on organic farms, and I currently find myself working for Rimmel Greenhouse Systems. A lot of what we do, even though greenhouse is in the name, I would say 80% of what we do is high tunnels to vegetable farmers. So it's a good place for me to be. I get to talk to people I like a lot, and it's fulfilling work. And I've learned a whole lot about high tunnels, aside of just having one on my own farm when I did it. I feel like I've run the gamut, hearing everybody's zoning issues and permitting issues and NRCSs from states up and down the East Coast. So I'm always happy to help. Love agriculture in general and helping out NJ growers specifically. So
yeah, so that's actually a good place for us to mention that Matt is incredibly helpful. I have to be honest. We didn't even realize how much material was going to be coming off the delivery truck. And so in our case,
the delivery truck actually wouldn't go into our neighborhood. So Matt was very kind. He went with me. We arranged a Home Depot parking lot. Matt and I drove around to find a truck big enough to unload the 2,000 pounds of metal. Matt helped me unload it onto the property. So Matt's middle name is Hero, if you don't actually know that, So.
Yeah, but I think that is something important to note. We have a 72 by 30 foot high tunnel, and that is how much? In Matt, it's like 2,000 something pounds of
2,800 pounds of steel and plastic, mostly steel.
Yeah, and so many residential areas will not let you in if you have the big truck to deliver with. So, so something to keep in mind.
It's something to think about. If you got a farm and you've got lots of hands, you know, you're probably well suited to build it yourself. But in my experience, it's just me. And Nagisa thought this could be a weekend project for me installing this thing. And so luckily that was not the case.
All right. So with that, for prep, we're going to, I think, Tony, we're ready for the video. Okay.
Hi, I'm Oscar Schofield, and you're on Riverstone Farm. We opened the farm 6 years ago, and we are putting up a high tunnel behind us. We found out about the EQUIP program through NOFA and NRCS, and we're really excited because we're going to be able to farm earlier in the year.
My name is John Klein, and the company is the Sunworks Corporation, and it's a small family business, and we build greenhouses. We've worked on greenhouses basically up and down the East Coast, from Maine down to Texas, and we built for residences. We built for noted people, and we've done big projects, 4 or 5 acres, and we've worked at most of the schools, universities, up and down the East Coast, Ohio State, Princeton, Cornell, Rutgers, Delaware State, and so on. The wood that you see here is for the baseboard on the length of the greenhouse on each side. And this is what we bolt our eye bolts and so on to, for the roll-up sides to actually close onto. The other pile of wood here is for the gable ends, and that will be framed out and then covered with a single sheet of poly. And this wood over here is cypress. It's long lasting, and it doesn't give off any fumes. And for organic growers, I think that's important. Some of the greenhouses I've worked on have used cypress, and some of them could be over 100 years old. And when you slice into the wood, it looks like brand new. So it's an everlasting wood. They used to use it all for your glass greenhouses years ago. And when they couldn't get the cypress, they went to redwood, which wasn't quite as good. And then, of course, aluminum now. So what we have here is the greenhouse actually going up. The ground posts, which you see down towards the end here, are actually 6 foot tall. They went in the ground approximately 3 foot. The layout on the greenhouse is very critical. For example, this here greenhouse is 30 foot wide, center to center. So it was important for us to keep the width right and make sure that the greenhouse was square. And then every 4 foot, we drove the posts into the ground. Here we have the framework of the greenhouse. It comes in sections. The bows are in 3 sections, and then we have the collar tie and some struts. Now we set our horses up to keep everything at the same plane, and then we go ahead and assemble. Now, this particular manufacturer, Rimmel Greenhouse, which is a great greenhouse, very strong, they mark out where we should put all our fittings so that everything is true to the final measurement that we need. And then from here, we take them over, stick them on the ground posts that we have set, and then go ahead and install the ridge and purlins and whatever else is on the side. And this house will have roll-up sides, and we'll do that after we get the frame completely up. These are the assembled trusses, and the fellows are going to bring them over to those ground posts that we had set, and they'll just put them on the ground posts. There's little inserts, and it connects the truss to the ground posts. Now they'll lift the truss up to go over the connector between the ground post and the truss. Randy is setting up to install the aluminum for the roll-up sides, and these sides will open when needed to let air into the greenhouse and cross ventilation. This is the aluminum track. It locks down the poly from the roof in the top layer, top run, and then on the bottom one, it'll lock down the poly that will be used on the roll-up side. But we're going to continue framing the greenhouse with the ridge and the purlins and the wiggle wire base for the sides, and then we'll install the baseboard down each side of the greenhouse. We'll continue by framing out each gable end and installing doors or whatever else they might have there. And then once everything is framed out, we'll go ahead and we'll either cover the gables first with a single layer of poly, or we'll cover the roof, which will be air inflated. And we'll pull 2 layers over and lock it down, install the inflation motor, and we'll be good to go.
As part of the program that got us the high tunnel, we're also going to convert a lot of this back field into a permanent pollinator zone. What's really nice is the program is helping us with advisors and some support to make this happen, and we're very excited. It was great to find out about the program through NOFA.
What the fellows are doing today are framing out the gable ends with wood, and this is getting ready to cover it with plastic, a single layer of plastic, which will be held on with what is called staple tape, or we can put wire lock base and wire lock, wiggle wire. And they're going to be doing both ends the same way. We have left an opening in the center for an 8-foot by 8-foot overhead door, but that's not on site yet. So we're going to close that down so that we just have a small 30-inch wide opening there to allow access to the greenhouse. And just way too windy today to even think about covering, but it's got to be done on a calm day. We decided to keep the wood up off the ground. This is not treated wood. This is just, I believe, hemlock fir. And we don't want it to get close to the ground so that it doesn't rot. And that was the problem if we get this wood wet and too close to the ground. Its lifespan will be greatly diminished. So we decided just to keep this framing up off the ground, and we will continue when we cover, take the plastic right down and bury it in the ground in front of the wood there. And then we'll of course have it either wire base and wiggle wire holding it there, or we'll have staple tape. So the wood should last a lot longer by keeping it up off the ground. What you see on the side here is the baseboard for the greenhouse, and this here closes the airflow off, allows the roll-up sides to actually close down over the top of that, and creating a somewhat of a seal there. The pipe that you see there is actually part of the roll-up system, and that will be either a manual or a motorized system, can be either, and the plastic will attach to that, and as you roll the pipe, it rolls up the side of the greenhouse and giving you some ventilation there. Today we're finishing up framing the gable ends, and we're applying and installing the single wire lock to each gable rafter here, and that will be what the poly attaches to. And hopefully we will catch a break with the wind. Right now it's just getting too windy to even think about pulling the poly onto the roof. But when we do, we'll put a single layer of poly on each gable end. We'll wire lock it down and staple tape where we have to. And then we'll pull 2 layers of poly on the roof. The first layer will be a layer of infrared poly. We'll pull that first, and we'll install the inflation kit. And then we'll pull the second layer and then lock it all the way down, both sides at the double wire lock, down over both gable ends. And then we'll actually come down and we'll install the pipe on top of the poly, and install a retainer to keep the poly attached to the pipe, the roll-up pipe for the sides. And but again, we are just waiting for the wind to not be so intense as it is right now.
You can tell that the pink is darker on that side. How's that look from out there, guys? Looks good. Let it up a little. Right there. Beautiful. We're good to go.
Strong people on site to build this thing, because those braces, those big steel gables that were going over the high tunnel, I think, Matt, what do they weigh? They weigh between 100 and 150 pounds per arch. And
Yeah,
so
well, it's
that,
constructed, yeah, like 140.
yeah, 140. Well, they seemed a lot heavier to me, honestly, but I'm sure they probably were 140. And so, you know, be sure you have 4 or 5 strong people to lift. Oh, I think there's a question in the chat from
So
Stephanie.
Stephanie Harris had a question about what did I mean by consider the neighbors? It was not considering whether we were going to put a green, high tunnel in or not. It's more the placement relative to their property line, and that there's enough distance so it doesn't become a point of contention when you go through approval. And then for the ventilation, you saw that there is actually a gap down. There are some gaps that allow some airflow in and out, but in the summer when it gets really hot, you have to pull up those sides. We were in over this last weekend and it was quite warm inside the high tunnel.
All right. I guess the only other thing, I put it in the chat, but just so everybody understands, what we did was we used a combination of 2 different kinds of wood when we were building the high tunnel. We used cypress closer to the ground where it actually comes in contact with moisture. And then for the ends, we used untreated fir because it's covered mostly by plastic. So only that piece at the bottom, which John was referring to, needed to be lifted off the ground in order to make sure that that wood doesn't get as wet, right? So that was a way to manage the cost, but still have the important pieces be the more expensive cypress.
So I'll make an addition as well. If the cost of that cypress baseboard is prohibitive, the baseboard is a fairly simple thing to replace if you have to when that lumber rots. So if you went with like a Douglas fir from your local big hardware store, it's going to last 3 to 5 years, but replacing that is kind of like a 2 or 3 hour project. So it has to be replaced more often than cypress, but it's not like replacing a whole end wall where you have to take apart the frame and get it all going. So
great. So and I will also say it's actually quite difficult to find cypress suppliers. So you either have to have it shipped in from North Carolina or Pennsylvania, because the mushroom growers in PA use cypress quite a bit. So there are a couple wood suppliers in Pennsylvania who have cypress, but they also have a limited area that they deliver to. So it does require a reasonable amount of research on that front as well. Okay, and I think that's basically it. Do we have any other questions? If not, I just want to reiterate my thanks to Jill Ott for taking the time this evening and explaining the program to everyone. And I also want to thank Matt for joining us because we couldn't have done it without you. And Tony for producing the video. This is probably, I don't know, Tony, what, your 5th or 6th production for NOFA? Really appreciate that. Oh, Stephanie's asking a question. She says, if the baseboards are off the ground, how do you keep out the rodents? I said, well, that's a good question. What we did was we had them leave a lot of extra plastic, about 2 feet of extra plastic on the ends, and we buried the plastic in the ground and then covered it with dirt and wood chips. And we're going to go back and put cinder blocks at the base as well. So that is how we think we're going to keep them out. But Stephanie, you're the expert. That may or may not be enough. We'll have to see.
We imagine our dogs will need to patrol the inside at set periods of time.
All right. Any other questions? So I think that covers it. Well, thank you very much for joining, everybody. Everything is posted on the NOFA site. We've dedicated a page to the High Tunnel Workshop that you'll have links to the videos. You have all the PowerPoint presentations as well as the reference materials. So best of luck. And I think the next question I'm sure will be, what are you going to grow in there? We will be covering that in future topics coming up. Oh, look, there's some more questions.
For how easy is it to roll up? To be perfectly honest, I haven't done it yet.
So maybe we should ask Matt.
They've demoed it. We're going to have a manual crank, and essentially it's a whole levered system. You turn, and it sort of turns that pipe up, lifting the plastic.
Let Matt answer the question.
Matt can talk about lots of the different options.
Yeah, so the most basic option is what Oscar was describing as a T-handle. That's a pipe cross, and then when you get the roll up to where you want it, there's a larger pipe that sort of acts as a kickstand that'll brace that roll up side against the dirt so it doesn't roll down any more than you want it to. The roll up side on a 30 by 72 probably weighs about 30 pounds at the bottom and 40-ish at the top when you roll it up. So it's not a lot of strength needed, but if you think about it, if you're tired at the end of a long day, and you have it all the way rolled up at the top and you let go of it, it's going to roll itself down quickly. We have a gearbox as well that will sort of help you 7-to-1 mechanical advantage, and it has a brake in it. So that would be like another crank, but you're not actually rolling up the side. The gears are doing it. And there's also automated options as well, which work on thermostats and allow you to leave the farm every so often.
Yeah, I think Tony, the other thing to consider is, I think Tony mentioned to me that we should probably look into covering for the top of the high tunnel, because in the summer it'll get super hot in there. I mean, it was actually as warm as a sauna this weekend. So it was very pleasant to be inside that high tunnel this weekend. But I think in the middle of the summer, it would probably be deadly hot. So you probably do need some sort of covering for the top of the high tunnel.
You can get away with a 30% shade cloth with most crops in New Jersey over the summer without hurting them. Most New Jersey growers don't need the shade cloth though through the summer. The roll-up side's open, and if you can open up the ends, will ventilate it enough. It will be hot, but typically that's not enough to slow down growth or make you want to grow outside of the tunnel. So still a plus to have the tunnel, but it does get toasty in there in the summer. Ventilation is important.
Great. Oh, Matt, maybe you should mention the smaller size that you have, because I think some people might be interested in a smaller size high tunnel.
Yeah, so all of our tunnels, every tunnel that we sell meets the NRCS guidelines. So the smallest one we have is 16 feet wide, and that comes in 48, 72, and 96 foot lengths. And our other high tunnels also, you can get widths pretty much anywhere from 18 to 30 foot wide, in any length from 24 to your imagination in 4-foot increments. So, we have a couple out there that are like 30 by 300. So, it's really just adding 4-foot lengths of the structure to keep going.
Great. Okay, well, I think that covers all the questions. So I want to thank everyone again. Thank you, all the speakers, and thank you, participants, for tuning in, and have a wonderful evening. And the video will be posted, so if you missed any part of it, you can dial in.
My name is John Knox. I farm organically in Somerset County.
I'm Allison Offline, and we're here at Snapping Turtle Farm.
Scott Morgan from Organic Family Farm.
My name is Michael Reddy, and my farm name is Spice Bush Farm.
My name is Andrea Kinnett. I'm the farmer at Martinet Farms.
I'm Jared. This is Closter Farm and Livestock Company.
I'm Zell George, and this is my wife, Shuhong Wong. You want to say your name? Okay. And this is Zell's Farm, and we're in Hillsborough, New Jersey.